Welcome to Explorations. Today we'll be talking with Christopher Stapleton, who is an experienced architect and producer and CEO of Simiosys Real World Labs and co-founder of the Virtual World Society. In this third of a five-part interview, Christopher discusses his research through the Media Convergence Laboratory and how he has used memory-scapes to explore nonlinear aspects of story. He introduces us to new ways of thinking about how story is a means to start a conversation and is a means of experiencing history through a new lens.
As Plato said, that I can learn more from a man through an hour of play than a year of conversation or language. And that in that hour of play is in three forms. And this is what I discovered in experimenting and exploring all levels of media, from live to written to filmed, captured audio, and games, even military and education. These aspects of story. This play comes in three parts with entertainment. And when all these different media forms came together when I was doing mega theme parks, is that there was the play that we have on stage, the play, which is really based in story. We have the play that we work with toys, which is really more open-ended. It's not as directed as that play on the stage. And then you have a game which you play that you actually are, being driven and having this conversation through the game mechanics that escalates your engagement and investment of time, of energy, of emotion. And they're all working together. And when I work with leading game developers, they all talk about these three aspects, even though they call them different things. Or I work with theme park designers or therapists. They all talk about these three elements of what I call story, play, and game. Play in the sense of a toy, which is open-ended and works for the imagination. It's just an object. It doesn't have to do anything. You're doing most of the work. To the story, which in today's Hollywood sign is more, master storytellers telling the audience, a story and putting them into this, what we call story trance. And then the game developer, who are really working with game mechanics, but that has really evolved into really kind of every one of these stories, game and play elements, from the toy designer, storyteller, and game designer, they've niched themselves so finely in this broad spectrum of play and story in games that they don't understand their interrelationship. So I worked with a leading instructional designer, Dr. Atsushi Hirumi, who we worked with his rigor of the foundation of experiential learning and my rigor of the heuristics of experiential entertainment. And we really found a common denominator of how we work with story to play in games, and really started to look at across a common experience and to kind of look at all these different terminologies and research to really connect how are they working together. So when we create something that is like a playful thing that you can learn from, they're not fighting from each other. And it wasn't the fact that entertainment was fighting with education. It was educators were fighting with entertainers. And that if they go back to their core craft, they can understand that play is learning and curiosity and experience. They're all have that common root, which is the same root where story and language came from. It's our playing with each other.
I know you've been transposing some of this thinking into the museum environment. Tell us a little bit about some of the projects you've been working on, where you've been working with story troves to help bring history to life.
One of the things that after 20 years of theater, film, theme parks, games, etc., I was in a commercial production, and I was really intrigued by the research happening on university campuses. And I was very much involved with visiting a lot of laboratories around the world with the ACM SIGGRAPH organization. And so I wanted to go in and start a research laboratory that really kind of understood, where can I take this commercial aspect of entertainment into a new level? It was after working with Islands of Adventure, which I think was probably the best theme park in the 20th century, which is, it's not just me saying that. and I just had a small part, but it was a culminating event. But the end product was just to have people amuse themselves and pass time. And I really wanted to take all these components of experience design into something more. And so when I started Research Laboratory, I said, can I create a space that can work with the cinematic language, the theatrical environment, the aspects of game and interactivity and toys? And I created this environment I call a memory-scape, and that embedded media that brought things to life, an audioscape, hypersonic sounds that we could transcend sound into your head. We worked with different kinds of media built into the furniture and into the scenery, and put sensors in there to activate things. And it was just kind of brought an environment to life. And we're looking at it as a memory-scape story, which didn't have a beginning or end. And we wanted to explore this interactive nonlinear aspect of story. And we had an open house, and the vision committee from the Holocaust Museum in Central Florida came by and saw it, and it moved them. And it was like, this is what we need for our museum, because we're going to be growing. And we set up a meeting, and we said, we're needing to tell the story about the Holocaust in a different way. Most people tell the Holocaust story in kind of one story, like Anne Frank, or, the Auschwitz. And these are important stories, but the mere sheer scale and number of the Holocaust didn't express the breadth and depth. And so this was about a million stories. And it wasn't a story like from Hollywood where it tied the ending in a nice, tidy little bow and saying, I laughed, I cried, and now that I had emotion, I don't have to deal with anything. They didn't really bring that story within their lives. They said that they needed a way to tell the story, not to tell a story, but to start a conversation. Because if they could start a conversation, that's the one thing that they can take home with them. And they can continue that conversation with each other, whether it's parent and child or peer to peer, and then bring it into their lives. And it's something that keeps on growing after they leave. And it's something that you don't have to focus on the devastating thing, because you can show videotapes of dead bodies being bulldozed into mass graves, but that was not the story, and that was not the ending. We had to teach 8th graders how to relate what needed to be learned from the Holocaust, much like how Viktor Frankl talked about, we need to, find the meaning through suffering when we look at history. And so that's where we developed and applied the memory-scape to that, to really start to understand that this story of a conversation is about really standing up for other people's dignity and respect, and to really kind of see through other people's eyes, and as John Lewis says, walk in my shoes. And that's the aspect of experiential learning in history that needed to be done. And then that really opened the eye as how we can start to structure this social learning, which has a great deal of research foundation that really enhances learning. And so then we were applied for a museum exhibit for NASA to really kind of teach STEM, not just STEM, but teach innovative thinking or innovation soft skills like critical thinking, creative problem solving, interpretive analysis, teamwork, these things that can't be taught in a book, that have to be taught experientially. And so we created a futuristic lunar habitat, and we created this environment that combined social media, telepresence, game design, theme park design, toys, etc., and this whole hybrid within what I call a media convergence laboratory, to really kind of see, how does it happen if all these things are fun and all these things are learning, how can we put it all to one? And once we started doing focus groups of the audience, we realized in prototypes, they have some quirks, okay? They aren't beautifully designed things. We mix these games with these playground, with this learning, and we observed after they experienced this immersive learning environment, is that what was the most frustrating? What station was the most frustrating because we want to improve upon it? And they would usually point to a certain station that was pretty frustrating. And then we'd ask them, well, which one was the most enjoyable? They would point to the same one that was frustrating. and to the evaluators around us that the museum was evaluating, they would look at that and say, oh, that's the most frustrating, so we have to fix that and take away the frustration. But what we realized in that focus groups is that when you take away the frustration, it becomes boring. And so it's a matter of, if you have something frustrating and you do it on your own, it's negative. If you have something that's frustrating and social, it's actually positive. Same thing, but with someone, it suddenly jumps into a positive range. And if you take that frustration out, it becomes boring and they don't pursue it. And this is one of the conclusions that we wanted to do, is that we wanted to make education, not like entertainment, something to achieve, not just to consume. And that was a major aspect in what we were calling the mixed reality learning landscapes. And then that's where, that work, our carpenter, our set builder, our master scenographer had a stroke and got aphasia. And then that's what got us into aphasia, which we translate everything that's in that lunar colony, in that memory-scape, into this thing we call a story trove that you can fit on a tabletop and just enjoy with people around a table, which is pretty much what their therapy sessions incorporated. And so there's so many lessons in that we learned that started that investigation.